Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 105. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be going over Unova Pokemon. Unova, best gen, no better gen than Unova. Unova is obviously where it's at, and we have some of the best competitive pokes to match, give or take a Cryogonal. But in all seriousness, Generation 5 does have a good number of Pokemon that can hold their own in current competitive formats, despite the fact that there's been power creep, and it seems like more often than not they at least get a buff every once in a while with like a regional variant. But starting off our Gen 5 team, we have a solid Gen 5 pick in Volcarona. And our Volcarona set today is going to be a pretty generic Volcarona set where we have the Heat Wave to be doing our Spray to Fire type damage, and we have the Giga Drain in order to sustain ourselves, but also to deal Grass type damage into things like Water types, Rock types, and Ground types. And then we also have the Quiver Dance on Volcarona to make it so that we're increasing our special attack damage that we're dealing and reduce the special defense damage that we're taking, and to increase our speed so that we're outspeeding everything on the field, hopefully. And Volcarona has the Flame Body ability, which means we have a 30% chance to burn the opponent whenever they make contact with Volcarona, and we have the Citrus Berry just for a little bit of extra healing whenever we want to get off our Quiver Dance. And we're Terra Dragon on Volcarona because it gives us some really nice resistances. Next up, we got Amoonguss. Amoonguss single-handedly best Gen 5 Pokemon, and that is because on Amoonguss, they're pretty much all the same. You got your Rage Powder in order to redirect moves away from hitting the Pokemon that you don't want to get hit. You've got the Spore for putting the opponent to sleep so that they can't even use their moves in the first place. And we just have the Sludge Bomb as a little bit of chip damage for the opponent, since nothing else on this team is running poison damage. Might as well be running it with Amoonguss because we'll get a little bit of stab. And for our Amoonguss, we're going Terra Water for good resistances, and we're going Regenerator just so we can get some health back by switching out Amoonguss, and we're going Covert Cloak so that the Fake Outs and other secondary effects are not stopping Amoonguss. Up next, we have a bit of an unconventional Whimsicott. This kind of Whimsicott would be better in previous generations because Whimsicott would get access to the move Nature Power, which is no longer in the game, which is probably one of my favorite moves to use with Prankster. And that's because Nature Power is technically a status move, however, it turns into other moves based on what terrain you're on. So if you're not on a terrain, Nature Power would have turned into Tri-Attack. If you're on a terrain, it turns into Energy Ball, depending on the generation. If you're on Fairy terrain, it turns into Moonblast. If you're on Electric terrain, it turns into Thunderbolt. And if you're on Psychic terrain, it turns into Psychic. However, we can't use that with Prankster because the Psychic terrain negates priority, so we really can't use Psychic as Nature Power. But Nature Power Whimsicott was a really cool set that unfortunately we cannot run here on our Choice Spec set, but we still have some pretty good options in the Energy Ball for dealing a 90 base power Grass type damage into the opponent, and the Moonblast for a 95 base power Fairy Stab, as well as we have the Switcheroo option in order to brick a Pokemon, hopefully by giving it the Choice Specs very quickly with our Prankster. We can do a lot of different things, like taking away a Pokemon that has an Eviolites item and giving them a Choice Spec so that they can only be forced to use one move, or stopping a Pokemon that's about to use a status move so they can't damage us anymore, or we could switcheroo the Choice Specs onto Volcarona once it has some boost, and then we can just increase Volcarona's damage from there. And I want to retract something that I said previously, and that is that I believed that if a Pokemon used up its item, you could not use switcheroo or trick on that Pokemon, but that is actually not true. I feel like I have said it at least like once or twice during the 128 teams challenge, but you can switcheroo an item on a Pokemon anytime at all, even if they're not holding an item. So, yeah, you can switcheroo the Choice Specs onto Volcarona, even if Volcarona's eaten the Citrus Berry already. You can also switcheroo the Choice Specs onto Amoonguss or Cryogonal, it's just that those two situations are way more circumstantial. And lastly, on Whimsicott, we just have the Tailwind for whenever we need a bit of speed control. We can lock ourselves in the Tailwind and then maybe swap out into another Pokemon, such as Amoonguss. And we are Terra Dark on Whimsicott mostly to avoid the effects of other Pranksters.
Next up on this team, we have Cryogonal, and Cryogonal is a super niche pick solely for the reason that we wanted a Pokemon that has the move Frost Breath so that we can proc a critical hit onto our Crocodile who has Anger Point, and since Crocodile also has Earthquake and we have Levitate, we can go for Frost Breath and then Earthquake with Crocodile without taking too much damage, by only taking the necessary damage that we need to land onto Crocodile in order to get its Anger Point procced. But then we also have the Icy Wind on Cryogonal, since Cryogonal's like decently fast, so it's able to keep up with the higher speed Pokemon. And we also have the Haze, just in case we need a safety option to get rid of some stat boost on things like Dondozo, or maybe perchance Volcarona that I've already started getting set up before our Volcarona does. And we have the Focus Sash, just to make it so that Cryogonal can always take at least one hit. And we're Terra Ghost to maybe perhaps dodge a Fake Out on Cryogonal. Up next, we have Crocodile, and this is going to be the super gimmicky Crocodile that you basically need closed team sheets for, and the fact that, as I mentioned before, we are running Anger Point, which means that whenever the Pokemon is critical hit, it will get its attack maxed out. So the idea is that we use Cryogonal's Frost Breath to land a critical hit, or we do the shenanigans with Samurott to land our critical hit on Crocodile, and then we get it to max attack, and then based on the damage that Crocodile takes, the Cryogonal will always proc the Salac Berry here, which means that we will get a speed boost whenever we're at 4 health. Samurott, not so guaranteed to proc the Salac Berry, but it can happen depending on the scenario. But then once we have one speed boost and a attack maxed out, we just throw all of these good moves into the opponent in our Earthquake, our Knockoff, and our Rock Slide in order to quickly KO their Pokemon, and Terra Grass mostly so that we can just dodge powder moves is the thing. And last but not least on this team, we just have regular Samurott here, who is going to be cooking with the Scope Lens item and Focus Energy in order to guarantee crits into our Aqua Jet that we could then use into Crocodile. But it's also okay to have Samurott here just in case we need a little bit of priority damage onto the opponent. And if we can't go for Focus Energy, we do have the Aqua Cutter, which with Aqua Cutter in combination with our Scope Lens will give us a 50% chance to land the crit if we need to land it into Crocodile, which is not super great, but it's better than nothing. Also, the main Samurott ability here would be Shell Armor, but I can maybe see you running Torrent on this Samurott set if you really got Samurott down low. Then having the 1.5 times boost on your Aqua Jet and Aqua Cutter would actually be kind of nice, but Shell Armor is maybe a little bit safer. Not that this Samurott set super matters in the grand scheme of this team, but you could do either or ability I could really see here. And we're Terra Poison on Samurott just to not take super effective damage from grass type moves. But yeah, that's the basic gist of the team. Let's get into some battles. Alright, so first up we have a battle against a very offensive team for Tailwind with the King Gambit, Dragapult, Ursaluna, and Primarina are all really good into our Crocodile strategy for different reasons. So we kind of have to choose carefully how we choose to play around them. We do start with Crocodile here and Whimsicott, and they start Dragapult and Talonflame, which is pretty alright for us. They decide to withdraw the Dragapult here, maybe seeing as that they didn't want to trade the damage for Crocodile for just Dragapult there. Also, Primarina is pretty safe at being a fairy type if it won't take a lot of damage from the knockoff that we get into it, but Primarina does lose the leftovers here. Now we get to swap in Samurott, and we Terra Grass Crocodile as Samurott takes the Brave Bird from the Talonflame, and we get the Rock Slide, which will take out the Talonflame, and Crocodile takes some okay damage from the Moonblast. But now their King Gambit comes to the field, and we bring in Amoonguss as a result, and now that Talonflame is down, Amoonguss has a lot more play. We bring back Samurott to the field here to maybe try and chip King Gambit, but they retreat Primarina for Dragapult here, meaning that Dragapult's exerting a lot of offensive pressure, and they immediately Terra Ghost and they Terra Blast into Amoonguss. But King Gambit we put to sleep the previous turn, so it's going to take a guaranteed sleep turn here as we get off our Focus Energy, and King Gambit wakes up, but it immediately goes for the Protect as we side Aqua Jet into Crocodile in order to activate its Anger Point, since we got the guaranteed crit chance here, and we also bring Crocodile just barely low enough health to activate its Salic Berry, which means that now Crocodile is faster than Dragapult and gets the knockoff into it. And now we're playing a bit of a game where we need to get rid of this King Gambit so that it can't Sucker Punch into our Crocodile. And we do Aqua Cutter the King Gambit there for the guaranteed crit. And Samurai actually lives, which is not something that I wanted to happen there. King Gambit's still Sucker Punching, and I just Aqua Cutter the Primarina as Primarina takes out Samurai. Maybe should have gone for the Aqua Cutter into King Gambit, but we're protecting, and the Sucker Punch is still failing because we're not using an actual attacking move, and we can just Energy Ball into the Primarina, and King Gambit now is fighting a 2v1, and it just finally picks the wrong target to Sucker Punch as Crocodile went for the Earthquake on that turn. But on that last turn, they either would have Sucker Punched Crocodile, so the fact that we Earthquaked our own Whimsicott wouldn't have mattered there, because if they Sucker Punched Crocodile, Crocodile would die, and then Whimsicott would just keep going for the Energy Ball, and probably still win the endgame as long as the Energy Ball doesn't Special Defense drop the King Gambit, which would have activated its Defiant. Whimsicott should have been fine there. Here we have an opposing Volcarona team where they have completely different components other than the Volcarona from us. But we start with Whimsicott and Amoonguss here, and the opponent starts with Volcarona and Rillaboom, and we swap out to our Volcarona here as they fake out into our Amoonguss, and they immediately go for the Heat Wave, which Volcarona takes okay, and Amoonguss takes also okay, so it gets to get off the Spore into Volcarona, so we're currently winning the Volcarona war with all things considered, and we extend that lead by going for Quiver Dance with our Volcarona. They U-turn into our Amoonguss, but that does not bring Amoonguss low enough to get knocked out, and Sludge Bomb is going to do some okay damage into their Tauros as everybody takes Grassy Terrain recovery. Volcarona goes for the Terra Dragon here, not wanting to take neutral fire type damage, and their Volcarona just goes for Quiver Dance after waking up for one turn, so we're currently pretty on par with our Volcarona. They fake out into our Volcarona as their Volcarona gets up another Quiver Dance, but we might as well have just gone for a move with our Amoonguss, so we get to put their Volcarona back to sleep again, and their Volcarona stays asleep, and we match them with our Quiver Dance here as their Rillaboom U-turns out into their Goldango, as Sludge Bomb is not going to do any damage to their Goldango, and Grassy Terrain wears off here, and we still need to proc our Citrus Berry, but we get the Heat Wave into both, and that is able to take their Goldango as Rillaboom returns to the field and resets the Grassy Terrain. Volcarona gets faked out, but activates its Citrus Berry, and Volcarona wakes up again and finally gets the Heat Wave to take out Amoonguss as our Volcarona is flinched from the fake out. But now we bring Whimsicott back to the field, and I switcheroo their Volcarona to make it so that they can't match our Quiver Dances anymore, and if they did go for Quiver Dance on that turn, they would be forced to Quiver Dance until the end of time because they only have 2 Pokemon left. Woodhammer does a little bit more damage than I expected into Volcarona, and they haven't procced our Flame Body yet. We protect Volcarona so that they can't take us out with Grassy Glide, and I also wanted to take off the Rillaboom's Assault Vest. That does mean that we can't go for Tailwind with Whimsicott anymore, but Whimsicott is also now more special tanky. The Grassy Glide is able to pick up KO into Volcarona, but Volcarona finally gets off the Flame Body here as we Moonblast Rillaboom for a lot of good damage. Volcarona is stuck boosting until the end of time, and Cryogonal is revealed to be our last Pokemon, catching the Grassy Glide with a Protect, and Whimsicott is able to pick off the Rillaboom with a Moonblast, and I didn't necessarily have to here, but I wanted to show that Volcarona was at max here, but we can just haze away the Volcarona's boost. In case we got into a scenario where their Volcarona was boosting faster than ours, we can just haze away their boost, and it's not so much of a problem. And lastly, we have a battle against a Sun team here, but they also have the Psy-Spam mode, and the Corviknight endgame can be very tricky here. But we start Volcarona and Crocodile as the opponent starts Incineroar and Sneasler, which is not the greatest lead for us, as we are immediately pressured into Amoonguss. They fake out into our Volcarona and they try to close combat into our Crocodile, but Amoonguss at least catches it and it doesn't do too much damage to Amoonguss. Sneasler uses the White Herb though, which probably means that it's unburdened and now it's super speedy. Volcarona gets Dire Clawed and it gets a Dire Clawed poison, but we return a Flame body onto the Sneasler, weakening its damage output as Incineroar tries to pick up the Flare Blitz into Amoonguss but does not get it. Amoonguss is going to Rage Powder here, and it's going to take the Dire Claw, okay, as we get Heat Wave to take out Sneasler, which was the big threat to Crocodile, except for a Corviknight that's set up here. But now the opponent reveals that they have Indeedee as we bring in Cryogonal, and I swap into Crocodile here, hoping that the opponent goes for Expanding Force, and they in fact do go for the Expanding Force, so we get to Side Frost Breath into Crocodile to activate its Anger Point and the Salac Berry, and Cryogonal just takes the Flare Blitz from Incineroar, and now we bring Volcarona back to the field, and I make a mistake on this turn, which is that I should just go for Earthquake since I'm protecting with Volcarona, and I went for the Rock Slide, and the Rock Slide missed the Indeedee, which might not have even taken out the Indeedee. The Earthquake definitely would, because the Earthquake is stab. But we tried knocking off the Corviknight, and Corviknight does not get KO'd. But since Indeedee is still alive, it gets to KO Volcarona, and Volcarona would have KO'd Corviknight. So, unfortunately, the opponent gets this match, but I know where I played the game wrong there, which is that I went for that unnecessary Rock Slide that I did not need to go for. It's also worth noting that on the previous turns, the Indeedee had to be Scarf in order to be outspeeding our Crocodile once we had the Salac Berry up, just because it is that tiniest bit of speed faster than our max speed Crocodile. So because they lock themselves into Expanding Force, they can no longer hurt Crocodile with Indeedee, but if they didn't have a choice item, then they would be slower than Crocodile always. But yeah, that's the basics of the Gen 5 team. Pretty gimmicky right here at the end, especially with Cryogonal, Crocodile, and Samurott. But, you know, all these Pokemon are good in their own rights, except for maybe Cryogonal. Cryogonal could use a buff of some kind just for doubles, not so much singles. It has a lot of things for singles, but doubles would maybe give it something else to do, other than just being a Frost Breath Pokemon with Levitate. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video, and even consider subscribing, because both of those things would help me out an absolute ton, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.